In this video clip, I'm going to talk about adding and utilizing Ohio Scales outcomes instruments and reports in the IPC or in Cato Provider Connect network, as well as accessing existing forms and reports that are in IPC using the filtering process. So for the outcomes instruments, there's 5 outcomes instruments that are included in the SHARES system, and they include the adult mental health, the youth mental health, including the parent, youth, and worker version, and then the brief addiction monitor for adult substance abuse. For each of these survey instruments or forms, there is a corresponding real-time client-level report that can also be generated. Once you're logged into IPC, to open a member file, again, you would, similar to what we talked about in the earlier clips, we go up under membership and come over and select search in the upper right corner, and this opens the search dialog box. And now that you're entering a form for someone who's been added to SHARES, you should have their client ID, and so with that client ID, it's no longer necessary to do a search by the last name, date of birth, or gender. Now you can go ahead and just enter the SHARES ID in the ID field in the search page. So I'm going to enter in one for a fake client and then click on the search button in the upper right hand corner. So when the member name appears, what you would do then is click on that member, and what that does is that opens that member record. To add a form, we would go back to the navigation structure, go to membership, and click on forms. And what this is going to do is generate a list of forms that have been completed for that individual, as well as down here at the bottom section, a set of folders that have different forms in them that you can use to add a new form for that client. In this particular case, we're interested in adding an outcomes form, so what I'm going to do is click on the outcomes folder, and then all 5 of the surveys that I mentioned are then listed, and you can choose the one that you're wanting to add for that particular client. I'm going to go ahead and click on the Ohio Scales for Adults, and then I click on Add Form, and what that will do is open up the Ohio Scales for Adults survey. And you'll notice that, similar to when adding a member, there are certain fields in the form that are required fields, and those are highlighted with the red font. It is not possible to save the survey or the form without providing this information. The agency ID up here at the top is the same thing as the SHARES ID for each agency. What I'm going to do is go ahead and enter that in, and then the administration date is the date that the survey was administered, not necessarily the date that you're completing the form online. So for example, if someone administered the survey before, in this case, let's say Thanksgiving, then you would go and change it to that date that is corresponds with the date that the individual completed the survey. So the process of completing the survey is something that agency should already be familiar with. I'm going to go ahead and quickly provide some data just so that I can also demonstrate the real-time clinician report that is generated from the survey responses for change over time. And the rest of this information I'm just going to go ahead and scroll through for now. You'll notice at the very bottom of the form there's a section called Scoring and Metadata. Please do not use. This section is used by the vendor and should not be completed or have any information added by the provider. So once you've completed the form, you just click on Save. You can click on Save as Draft, but I recommend that you avoid using that because it takes the form and places it in a different location. Your best bet is to click on Save, and if at some point you need to change the data, you can go back in, open the form, make the changes, and click on Save again. So having saved the document, what happens is the report viewer opens, and you have a drop-down menu that pops up, and you see it says Select Prior Administration Date. If this was the first survey completed for this client, in the drop down would just be one item, and it would be titled No History. In that case, you would select No History, and it would provide you the report based on the limited information in a single survey administration rather than the changeover time information that's also usually included. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a previous version or a previous outcome for this individual, and then click on View Report. What this does then is creates, provides access to a real-time report of the client's responses from one time or one administration to a previous administration that the clinician can use and also go over with the client and give a copy of to the client. You'll notice that it is also up here you have options, and it is possible to export this report to PDF or Excel or TIFF, which is similar to a picture file, Word document. Those options are available, and you can also go ahead and print the report. And the report has 2 pages, sometimes maybe 3, depending on the response patterns. But in general, it's designed to show on the first part of the report scores or changeover time patterns. And so in this particular case, it will show you the time 1 administration date as well as the most recent time 2 administration date. And for items where progress was made, it will be shown in green, and the larger the amount of the progress, the more bars across it will have in green. For those that have no bar, that means there's been no change from time 1 to time 2. And for those that have a bar that's on the red or moving to the left, that means that the progress or that the score worsened from the most recent administration compared to the first administration. And then on the second page, and you also notice, below each of the scales for changeover time, for example, symptom distress, it will show you the time 1 and time 2 scores for that individual, allowing you also to see the scale score changes over time. And the same for the quality of life. You'll have the time 1 average as well as the time 2 average. And then the second page is tied specifically to responses from the most recent administration. And what this is doing is showing basically someone's strengths, obstacles, and achievements that have been made or that are demonstrated in their most recent administration. So for example here, overall quality of life scale, the individual had positive responses to the amount of meaningful activity, amount of freedom they have, and the way they act toward they and their family act toward each other, whereas they had a negative response to the amount of friendship in their life. And similar, you see that this individual's had a negative response to how often the physical condition interferes with day-to-day functioning. And then you see a variety, a lot of strengths on empowerment, as well as some weaknesses. And then finally is the symptom distress. And then on this particular report, because of the amount of items that showed up, there actually is a third page, and I suspect it's just going to be the key that would normally be at the bottom of page 2. And it also will show any items in which the individual did not provide a response. So once this information, the agency's got that, but they want to get an actual printout of a summary of the survey, what they would do at that point is go back and open up that form. And the most recent form is primarily the one that will always show up at the top of the list. And then you'll see that there's a series of buttons down here in the bottom right. And to be able to print this a summary of this survey, you do not want to use the print button. That is similar to clicking on print when you're in a web page. It's going to print everything that is there, but it won't necessarily include these scores or the client level information. So you want to click on the summary button, and what that will do is that will incorporate the client information, the date of birth, policy numbers, the administration date, agency ID, as well as all of their responses. And then at the bottom of the summary is where you will find the scale scores for that individual. And So you see like financial quality of life at a 3.0, 3.4 for empowerment. And these scale scores will appear. If they don't appear, it means that there were too many missing items to allow for computation for that item. Once you're in the summary, then you can click on print. That will open your print dialog box and allow you to print the summary. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, and anytime you close it without having your last action being a save, it will give you this warning, and you can go ahead and just click on form without saving, if you're sure it's already been saved. That's the same process you would go through for all of the forms, whether it's the adult consumer outcome or it's one of the youth or the BAM. You would always just go into the open a member file, go into membership, click on the forms button, and then come to the folder, outcomes folder, to select the particular form that you want. So one of the other things that I want to talk about in this clip is how to access existing forms and reports that are in IPC. So for example, you've administered this survey, and 2 weeks from now you want to be able to pull the survey back up. And I'm going to go ahead and go back to the home page to walk through this. But and I'm also going to go ahead and log out and log back in to demonstrate two different ways to access forms. And this is simply a matter of what it is you're trying to capture, or what you're trying to look for. If at the agency level, for example, you want to have a list of all the forms completed by your clients, in that case, when you log in, you would not open a member file. Instead, you would just be at your login, the main page, and you can come up under membership and go ahead and click on forms. What that's going to do is produce a list of all the forms for clients at your agency. Now here's the thing that is important and this is something that a number of people have already reached me about and have struggled with. It's somewhat difficult to remember, but it's also critical to remember, is that you say you get this list of 3, but you anticipate that the list should have far more forms or surveys in it. Keep in mind that this list is only going to provide those that are recently added forms. To access all of your forms, or to filter for forms, you would need to click on this Filter Forms for All Members link that's up here in the left-hand corner. Once you click on that, a drop-down set of options opens up to you. You can change the date, you can do a search by a particular form type, by form name, insurer, if you happen to be an agency that's serving people at multiple board areas, which would be unlikely. But most of the time what you're going to want to do is just be able to change the date. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and change it from 2015 to 2014, and then I'm going to click on the filter button at the top of the page. See here, there's a mixture of forms for, you've got the Ohio scales, you've got the eligibility and enrollment, as well as the pre-prediction monitor and the parent. So that is one way to access the forms. If you're looking for a form for a particular member, you would go ahead, type in the search page, using again membership search, you type in their client ID or shares ID and click on the search button. That produces a list of forms for that individual. By clicking on that member to open their file, you see now they're open in the upper left hand corner, and then you come over to membership and click on forms to get a list of their forms that are specific to that client. And again, if you're thinking there should be more forms listed, you would use this filter, Forms for Lake to Jack, to change the date to be able to allow for it to go back further to look for those forms, and then click on the filter button. And you see by doing that it added 2 additional surveys for this individual. So as I said, there's 2 different ways that you can access forms for your existing clients once you've gone ahead and already exited out of the initial completion of the form. One is to go and log into that individual client member file and then go to membership forms, or the other is, as you log in before opening a member file, to just go to the membership forms tab.